The sky was silent, too silent. At 25,000 feet, one man sat alone at the tail of a bomber, staring into a cold gray dawn. No backup, no escape, just steel, sky, and death waiting behind him. Enemy fighters were coming fast, shadows slicing through the clouds. One mistake, 1 second late, and the entire bomber would vanish. This was the loneliest job in the war, to fight alone, to protect everyone else. Today, we bring you the true story of a tail gunner whose courage changed the battle in the skies forever. Welcome to my channel, Assad History. At 6:15 hours on July 30th, 1943, the B-17 flying fortress known as Tandalo rolled down the runway at RAF Kimbolton, its engines vibrating the cold English tarmac like a living heartbeat. In the tail compartment, Staff Sergeant Michael Aruth squeezed into the 4-foot-wide metal cage that would become both his sanctuary and his trap. Outside, the dawn was gray, indifferent, and endless, stretching across fields that would never witness the storm unfolding above. Every inch of his body pressed against the narrow frame, every breath forming frost in the freezing air, every heartbeat echoing against the thin aluminum walls. This was a place where seconds carried the weight of eternity, where calculation and instinct collided in a brutal dance. He had flown 12 missions before, seen bullets tear through steel, watched friends vanish into the sky, and yet nothing prepared him for the dawning realization that today he would fight not just for victory, but for survival itself. The tail gunner's compartment was a crucible of isolation. 40 feet of fuselage separated him from the rest of the crew, an invisible wall that rendered radio chatter distant and human help impossible. He could see their faces, their movements, their nervous checks of instruments, but they were ghosts in a world he alone inhabited. His weapons, 2 Browning .50 caliber machine guns, pointed backward through a plexiglass bubble, cold, loaded, precise, and deadly. They were extensions of his will, and his will alone. Every fighter in the Luftwaffe knew the vulnerability of a bomber from the rear. They timed attacks with cruel precision, their closure rates calculated in fractions of a second. And yet, Aruth did not tremble. He could feel the rhythm of approaching aircraft in his chest, anticipate angles, judge trajectories before the enemy had fully committed. The air was thick with the tension of anticipation. The difference between life and death, victory and oblivion, was often a single heartbeat or a single pull of the trigger. Memory sharpened his focus. He remembered the 6th mission, the bomber that had taken a direct hit, the tail gunner who never fired a shot, and the fighters that tore the sky apart. 8 parachutes appeared in the distance, but the 9th man never emerged. That memory burned in him now, a reminder that patience could kill, that training manuals could betray, that doctrine was deadly if followed without thought. He had learned to open fire early, to disrupt enemy plans, to force hesitation before the German pilots could execute theirs. Aggression, controlled and precise, had become his mantra. One miscalculation could shatter the formation, could rip apart the fragile safety of dozens of men below. The calculus of survival was merciless, yet in it lay clarity. He did not hesitate. He could not. Waiting meant death. As Tandalo lifted toward Germany, the formation stretched into the gray horizon, a river of silver machines heading into a storm of fire and steel. Each fighter that emerged from clouds was a ghost of inevitability. Aruth's eyes tracked every movement, walking tracers onto the approaching wings, calculating closures, adjusting bursts, measuring every angle. The cold bit harder, each gust of wind a razor against exposed skin, but his hands did not slip. Each round of ammunition was precious, yet he fired without hesitation. His goal was not destruction for glory, it was survival for everyone aboard. Waves of attackers came and went, spiraling, diving, breaking. 3 kills confirmed, a 4th probable. He was wounded, 1 arm bleeding, 1 gun jammed. Yet he pressed on. The formation pressed forward, each second a negotiation between life and annihilation. 47 minutes of relentless assaults shaped a new reality above Europe. Fighters came in, precise and deadly, yet Aruth dictated the terms of engagement. Each burst of fire disrupted the enemy's rhythm, protected bombers that had no idea of the battle raging behind them. Manual instructions on patience and conservation had been discarded. They were luxuries he could not afford. Instinct, calculation, courage, these were the only constants. And as the aircraft pierced deeper into hostile skies, the sky itself became a stage where one man alone defined the line between survival and destruction. The lessons of that day would ripple silently through history, unnoticed by the public, but forever imprinted in the aircraft that returned to England, the crew that survived, and the solitary figure in the tail who had held the line against overwhelming odds. The bomber pressed on over the clouds, silver wings cutting through the gray expanse, every movement deliberate, every vibration amplified by the cold that gnawed at Michael Aruth's body like a living predator. Each second was a test of endurance, of focus, of calculation. He was alone in that narrow compartment, yet the weight of responsibility pressed on him more than the cold, more than the distance. The rest of the crew operated in compartments that offered minimal awareness of what unfolded at the tail. They followed instruments, procedures, and instinct, but none could see what Aruth saw. None could anticipate the shadows approaching from behind. None could react in the milliseconds that mattered. His eyes scanned the horizon, tracking the black crosses of German fighters as they emerged from cloud and sky, closing in like predators on a calculated path. He counted them, estimated closure speeds, adjusted aim, all while the aircraft thrummed beneath him, a fragile, humming machine carrying dozens of lives over hostile territory. The first wave struck with precision, a quartet of Messerschmitts diving from the high 6 o'clock position. Aruth's fingers tightened around the twin Browning triggers, heart steady, mind detached yet intensely present. The first burst of tracers shot into the sky, following the lead fighter's engine cowling. The enemy reacted instantly, banking sharply, smoke trailing from wing and fuselage, their formation disrupted by a single man operating in a metal coffin at the end of a fuselage. Minutes stretched into eternities as he tracked each movement, fired in controlled bursts, conserving ammunition yet refusing to hesitate. The standard doctrine of the Army Air Force, wait until 300 yards, fire short bursts, conserve rounds, had been discarded long ago. He knew that by the time a fighter reached 300 yards, the damage would be done. His early engagement at 700 yards, practiced on previous missions, had become instinct. A strategy that would save the lives of his crew again and again. A second wave came lower, trying to slip beneath his line of fire. The angle forced Aruth to depress the guns nearly to their mechanical limit, one arm bleeding from shrapnel, the other steady on the trigger. The vibration of the aircraft under him was a constant reminder that the machine itself could fail at any moment, that every movement was both leverage and risk. The tracers arced through the sky like silver lightning, connecting, missing, adjusting, always adapting. Enemy fighters pulled back, dived, broke formation, attempted flanking maneuvers, but he anticipated them all. The air around him was filled with the smell of gunpowder, the hiss of escaping hydraulic fluid, the metallic tang of stress and cold. Each enemy aircraft destroyed was both victory and warning. More were coming, relentless, precise, determined to find the weak spot in the formation, to test the limits of courage, of endurance, of steel and human will. The bombing formation ahead remained unaware of the silent war raging behind them. To them, the sky was open, the mission straightforward. But Aruth's mind calculated trajectories, distances, angles of attack with cold precision. Each fighter approaching represented a decision: fire early and risk running dry of ammunition, or wait and risk annihilation. His eyes flicked to the ammunition counters. 400 rounds per gun, 800 total, each one precious, each one potentially the difference between life and death. Yet the calculation was not only mechanical. Instinct, sharpened by the memory of friends lost, dictated every burst, every aim, every choice. His mind was a battlefield of its own, adrenaline against fear, calculation against chaos, instinct against protocol. And in that crucible, he survived, not by chance, but by mastery of both human and machine. The cold became unbearable, frost forming on his gloves, his hair frozen, his breath visible in clouds inside the compartment. Pain from shrapnel ran through his arm and shoulder, yet he ignored it, focused on the rhythm of battle. Enemy fighters continued their relentless assault. Focke-Wulfs, Messerschmitts, shadows moving faster than the eye could track. Every burst of fire from Aruth disrupted attack patterns, saved bombers, and imposed fear on the Luftwaffe pilots who had thought the tail gunner a weak point. Time and space warped, seconds stretched, each heartbeat a drum of calculation. He had to survive not for glory, not for recognition, but because his crew depended on him, because the mission demanded it, because history waited to be written in silver tracers and frozen sweat. The third wave struck without warning, a coordinated dive from multiple angles, forcing Aruth to fire continuously, moving between targets, adjusting aim, predicting movements. His guns roared, the sound deafening, reverberating against the metal walls of the compartment. Yet his focus never wavered. The sky above Europe became a canvas of. The sun rose higher, cutting thin shafts of pale light across the endless formation of B-17s, yet the light brought no comfort. Above and behind, the sky was a chessboard of death, black crosses slicing through gray clouds like knives. Michael Aruth's eyes were relentless, scanning, calculating, anticipating every dive, every turn, every angle of attack. The Luftwaffe pilots had learned some patterns, but he had learned faster. Every formation, every distance, every vector memorized in milliseconds. His body shivered with cold, blood from minor shrapnel wounds freezing against his uniform, yet his hands never faltered on the triggers. Every enemy fighter approaching meant a split-second decision: fire and risk running out of rounds, or wait and risk total annihilation. There was no room for hesitation. Waiting was not survival. It was a death sentence. Each plane that dove from the clouds tested his instincts, tested his courage, tested the limits of human endurance. And through it all, he remained the invisible guardian, the solitary figure holding the line, dictating the terms of engagement in a war fought at 25,000 feet above Europe. The first wave of the morning came like a black storm. Focke-Wulfs and Messerschmitts diving in coordinated attacks, engines screaming, guns blazing. Aruth fired early, at distances far beyond what manuals recommended, walking tracers onto the lead aircraft as the formation twisted and broke under his fire. 1 burst, 2 bursts, 3, each round a carefully calculated gamble, each burst a declaration of survival against overwhelming odds. The tracers illuminated the gray morning, painting lines of steel and smoke across the sky, disorienting the enemy, forcing hesitation, breaking their rhythm. Each fighter that veered away meant a bomber behind him survived. Each wingman forced to maneuver meant a life saved. And yet, the cost was relentless. His body ached, one arm numb, one gun jammed, fingers stiff with frost, lungs burning from cold air, but his focus never wavered. Time slowed, stretched, became elastic, each second a crucible of calculation and instinct. A second wave approached from multiple vectors, attacking Tandalo simultaneously from high and low, left and right. Aruth rotated between targets, firing controlled bursts, moving with precision that defied exhaustion. The sound of guns, the vibration of the aircraft, the whistle of rounds passing too close for comfort, all merged into a symphony of survival. Enemy aircraft spiraled, some smoking, some disintegrating in trails of fire, but more kept coming, relentless, trained, calculating. Every second demanded vigilance. Every heartbeat was a negotiation between courage and fear, between human limitation and mechanical precision. Yet he pressed on, alone, the fate of dozens resting on a single pair of hands, a single pair of eyes scanning the horizon. Amid the chaos, the crew of Tandalo remained unaware of the true danger that had shadowed them across hostile skies. They monitored instruments, adjusted headings, prepared for bomb release, oblivious to the waves of fighters Aruth intercepted, the shots that redirected death away from their fragile fuselage. Each engagement stretched his endurance further, pushing him to the edge of human capability. The compartment around him felt smaller, the cold sharper, the weight of responsibility more pressing. Yet, with every calculated burst, every shot fired, he rewrote the rules of engagement. The doctrine that had doomed countless tail gunners was irrelevant here. Instinct, aggression, precision, and courage defined survival. And Aruth embodied all four. Hours passed in a blur of fire, steel, and smoke. Enemy aircraft continued to engage, but their patterns became predictable as he imposed his will, forcing hesitation, disrupting attacks, turning their own calculations against them. Ammunition dwindled, but he did not falter. One gun jammed, one arm bleeding, the other hand firing continuously, yet he adapted, calculated, survived. The sky itself seemed to bend to his purpose, the wind and cold, secondary to the rhythm of engagement he established. And as Tandalo pressed toward the target deep in Germany, the crew still unaware of the battle that raged behind them, the realization became undeniable. Courage was not about absence of fear, but mastery of action under pressure. Survival was not about manuals, but about instincts honed to perfection, and one man, isolated at the tail, could change the fate of an entire formation. The sky had cleared slightly as Tandalo pressed back toward England, but the danger had not ended. Michael Aruth, wounded and exhausted, still manned the tail position with the precision of a man who had mastered fear itself. Every fighter that appeared was met with controlled bursts of fire, his tracers dancing across the sky, disrupting attack runs, saving lives he would never meet. The crew, unaware of the full scale of the battle behind them, trusted in machines and manuals, but survival depended on one man and his instincts. Blood ran along his arm. One gun jammed, yet he continued, each shot a defiance of death, each decision a calculation of risk and life. The mission had begun with uncertainty, but it ended with mastery, courage, and resilience. This is the story that history often forgets, the tale of courage in the loneliest position of war, where patience could kill and action could save dozens. Michael Aruth's early engagement, his defiance of doctrine, and his ability to calculate every attack in real time saved his crew repeatedly. 3 confirmed kills, countless disruptions, and the survival of Tandalo were proof that one man, committed, fearless, and precise, could change the outcome of a mission that seemed impossible. This was not luck. It was instinct, skill, and the raw courage that history rarely records, but the skies always remember. If you felt the tension, the fear, and the courage in this story, remember, history is more than dates and numbers. It is human spirit, daring to survive, daring to defy the impossible. Every decision, every heartbeat, every calculated burst mattered. And today, through this story, we relive the courage of those who face the skies alone, in freezing metal tubes, against overwhelming odds. Welcome to my channel, Acid History. If you want more powerful stories that shock the mind, challenge your courage, and reveal the human spirit, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Don't miss a single story, because history like this is never told twice.